I never thought a piece of paper could destroy a family. But my father's will didn't just divide his assets, it divided us forever. Or so I thought. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my family fell apart and somehow found each other again in the most unexpected way. It started 3 years ago, on a Tuesday morning that changed everything. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and broken dreams. Mom sat between my brother Jake and me, her hands trembling as Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Your father's final wishes are quite specific," he said, sliding the document across the mahogany table. What we read that day would haunt us for years. Dad hadn't just left us his fortune, he'd left us a puzzle. One that would tear our family apart piece by piece, until we forgot what it meant to be siblings at all. The will was unlike anything we'd expected. Dad, always the strategic businessman, had divided his $2.3 million estate in the most unusual way possible. "The house goes to Sarah," Jake read aloud, his voice getting tighter with each word. "The business to Jake." "And the liquid assets." He paused, staring at the page. "Split equally between all three, but only accessible if all parties agree unanimously on every withdrawal." Mom looked confused. "What does that mean?" I felt my stomach drop. "It means we're stuck together forever. We can't touch Dad's money unless we all agree on everything." Jake slammed the document down. "This is ridiculous. He's controlling us from the grave." But there was more. So much more. The business Dad's pride and joy, the construction company he'd built from nothing, came with conditions. Jake couldn't sell it, couldn't change its name, and couldn't make any major decisions without family consultation. The house, my childhood home, couldn't be sold unless both Jake and Mom agreed. "He's trapped us," I whispered. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "There's one more thing. Your father left individual letters for each of you. He requested they be opened only in times of family crisis. We should have opened them right then. Maybe everything would have been different. But we were angry, hurt, confused." Jake stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "This is insane. He's dead, and he's still trying to run our lives." He grabbed his coat. "I'm contesting this. There's no way this is legal." "Jake, wait." Mom reached for him, but he was already heading for the door. "Don't. Just don't. I can't believe he'd do this to us." The door slammed behind him, and the silence that followed felt like a funeral shroud. That was the beginning of the end. Over the next few months, our family unraveled like a cheap sweater. Jake hired lawyers. I hired different lawyers. Mom got caught in the middle, trying to play peacekeeper in a war that had no winners. The business struggled without clear leadership. Jake couldn't make decisions fast enough with the family consultation requirement, and every family meeting turned into a screaming match. I was living in the family house, but it felt more like a museum than a home. Everything reminded me of Dad, and everything reminded me of how he'd seemingly betrayed us all. The money Dad's life savings sat untouched in the bank account. None of us could agree on anything. Jake wanted to use it to expand the business. I thought we should invest it conservatively. Mom just wanted us to stop fighting. "This isn't what your father wanted," she'd say during our increasingly rare phone calls. "Then why did he do this to us?" I'd snap back. She never had an answer. Birthdays passed unacknowledged. Thanksgiving became a solo affair. Christmas was the worst. I sat in Dad's old chair, looking at the empty spots around the dining room table, wondering how we'd gotten here. Jake and I communicated only through lawyers. Mom tried to bridge the gap, but we were both too stubborn, too hurt, too convinced that the other was being unreasonable. "Sarah, he's your brother," Mom would plead. "He's the one who chose lawyers over family," I'd reply. "Jake, she's your sister," Mom would tell him. "She's the one living in Dad's house like some kind of princess," he'd counter. We were both wrong. We were both right. We were both miserable. The worst part wasn't the money or the property disputes. It was the silence. The absence of the people who'd known me my entire life. Jake had been my best friend growing up. We built forts together, shared secrets, supported each other through breakups and job losses and all the regular catastrophes of adult life. Now we were strangers who happened to share DNA and a very complicated legal situation. I started avoiding places where I might run into him. He did the same. Our small town felt enormous and claustrophobic at the same time. Mom aged 10 years in 10 months. I'd catch her sometimes, staring at old family photos, tears streaming down her face. "I'm losing all of you," she'd whisper. "First your father, now this." But neither Jake nor I was ready to back down. Pride is a terrible thing. It builds walls where there should be bridges, creates silence where there should be conversation. The business continued to struggle. I heard through mutual friends that Jake was working 18-hour days, trying to keep Dad's company afloat without the resources he needed. The family consultation requirement meant every major decision required a meeting, and we couldn't be in the same room without lawyers present. I wasn't doing much better. The house felt haunted not by Dad's ghost, but by the ghost of our family. Every room held memories of better times, and every memory was now tainted by our current reality. I considered selling my portion back to Jake just to end the nightmare. But Dad's will had specific clauses about that too. Everything was designed to keep us together, and instead, it was tearing us apart. The letters sat unopened in my dresser drawer. Jake's sat unopened on his kitchen counter. Mom's sat unopened on her nightstand. We were all too angry to hear whatever Dad had to say. He'd done enough damage from beyond the grave. Or so we thought. 3 years. 3 years of lawyers and silence and Christmases spent alone. 3 years of a family business slowly dying and a family home that felt more like a mausoleum than a sanctuary. 3 years of wondering what Dad had been thinking. And then, on a cold February morning, everything changed. The phone call came at 6:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I'd been lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how the rest of my life would look. "Sarah?" Mom's voice was shaky, scared. "You need to come to the hospital now." My heart stopped. "Is it Jake?" "No, honey, it's me." I threw on clothes and drove to the hospital. Faster than I'd ever driven in my life. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Mom was in bed 3, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "What happened?" "Heart episode." "I'm okay, but..." She gripped my hand. "Sarah, I called Jake too. He's coming." My stomach dropped. "Mom, you know we can't." "I don't care about your lawyers or your pride or any of it," she said with more strength than I'd heard from her in months. "I almost died tonight, and my biggest regret wasn't anything I'd done. It was what I hadn't done. I haven't had both my children in the same room in 3 years." Before I could respond, I heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. Jake appeared in the doorway, and for a moment, time stopped. 3 years of anger and hurt and stubborn pride hung in the air between us. He looked older, tired. His hair was graying at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Is she okay?" he asked, not looking at me. "She will be," I said, not looking at him. Mom squeezed both our hands. "I need you both to promise me something." We waited. "When I die and don't argue with me, it's going to happen someday. I want you to promise me you won't spend my funeral the way we've spent the last 3 years." Silent, angry, alone. Jake and I exchanged the first direct look we'd shared in forever. "Mom," Jake started. "Promise me," she insisted. We promised. Of course we promised. We just never thought we'd have to keep that promise so soon. They say funerals bring families together. Whoever they are, they've obviously never been to one of ours. Mom lasted 8 more months after that night in the hospital. 8 months of careful conversations and awkward family dinners where Jake and I spoke to her but not to each other. 8 months of pretending we were fine while our family business continued to crumble. And our relationship remained frozen in time. She died on a Sunday, peacefully in her sleep. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Sunday had always been family day when we were kids. Church, then brunch, then whatever adventure Dad had planned. Now it was the day we became orphans. The funeral home was exactly what you'd expect: beige walls, soft music, and the overwhelming smell of lilies that would make me nauseous for years afterward. Jake and I sat on opposite sides of the planning table, communicating through the funeral director like we were negotiating a business deal. "The deceased requested a simple service," Mr. Garrett said, consulting his notes. "No visitation, just a memorial service followed by burial beside your father." Simple. That was Mom. Even in death, she was trying to make things easier for us. She'd failed. The church was packed. Mom had touched so many lives: neighbors, church friends, her book club, people from Dad's old business associates. Everyone except the people who mattered most. Jake and I sat in the front pew, with exactly 4 feet of empty space between us, like we were afraid the other one had some contagious disease. The disease was pride, and we were both terminal cases. The service was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose the left side of the front pew, closest to where Mom's casket would be. Jake arrived 10 minutes later and, after a moment's hesitation, sat on the right side. The space between us felt like the Grand Canyon. People filed in slowly, offering quiet condolences and sharing memories of Mom. Mrs. Henderson from down the street talked about how Mom had brought her soup when she'd had pneumonia. Tom from the hardware store mentioned how she always asked about his grandkids. Sarah from the book club, yes, we had the same name, which had always been a source of gentle confusion, talked about Mom's infectious laugh during their monthly meetings. Everyone had stories about Mom. Everyone except Jake and me. We'd been so busy not talking to each other that we'd forgotten to build new memories with her. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Pastor Williams took the podium at exactly 2 p.m. He'd known our family for 20 years, had married Mom and Dad, had baptized both Jake and me. He looked uncomfortable as he began. Elizabeth Chen was a remarkable woman, a devoted wife, a loving mother, and a pillar of our community. His eyes flicked between Jake and me. She was also a peacemaker, someone who believed that family was everything, and that love could overcome any obstacle. I felt Jake shift beside me. We both knew what Pastor Williams was really saying. The eulogy was beautiful and heartbreaking and everything Mom deserved. But all I could think about was the empty space on the pew between us, and how she'd spent the last 3 years of her life watching her children destroy what she'd spent decades building. After the service, people lingered. Everyone wanted to share stories, offer help, express their condolences. Jake and I moved through the crowd like opposing magnets, never getting too close, never acknowledging each other's presence. Sarah, honey, Mrs. Patterson from Mom's book club touched my arm gently. Your mother talked about you all the time. She was so proud of both her children. Both. Always both. Even when we weren't acting like siblings, Mom had never stopped seeing us as a unit. She used to say that you and Jake were just going through a rough patch, Mrs. Patterson continued. She was so sure you'd work things out. I glanced across the room where Jake was talking to some of Dad's old business contacts. His shoulders were rigid, his smile forced. He looked as miserable as I felt. The graveside service was worse. There's something about standing beside an open grave that strips away all the pretense, all the carefully constructed walls we build around our emotions. Mom's casket was polished mahogany, simple but elegant. Dad's headstone was right beside the fresh grave, and for the first time in 3 years, our whole family was together again. 2 graves, 2 living children, and 3 years of silence that felt heavier than the dirt. They'd soon shove over our mother's casket. Pastor Williams said a prayer. The funeral director handed us each a rose to place on the casket. Jake went first, his hand shaking slightly as he laid the white rose on the polished wood. I love you, Mom, he whispered. My turn. I stepped forward, my legs feeling like jelly. The rose seemed impossibly heavy in my hand. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to Mom or to Jake or to myself. I'm so sorry for everything. The words hung in the air like smoke. After the burial, people slowly dispersed. There would be a reception at the church, but neither Jake nor I felt like pretending to be sociable. We stood there in the cemetery, 20 feet apart, both staring at the fresh grave that held our mother and all our regrets. She hated this, Jake said suddenly. The first words he'd spoken directly to me in 3 years. I looked up, startled. What? The fighting, the lawyers, the whole mess. He kicked at a clump of dirt. She told me once that losing Dad was hard enough without losing us too. My throat tightened. She said the same thing to me. We stood in silence for a few more minutes. The cemetery was nearly empty now, just us and the groundskeepers waiting respectfully in the distance. The business is failing, Jake said suddenly. I wasn't sure how to respond. We'd been communicating only through lawyers for so long that normal conversation felt foreign. I'm sorry, I said finally. Are you? His voice wasn't angry, just tired. Or are you glad that Dad's plan is backfiring? Jake, I started, then stopped. What could I say? That I was glad. That I wasn't? That I'd spent 3 years alternating between fury and guilt and loneliness. I never wanted this, I said instead. Neither did I. He finally looked at me directly. But here we are. Here we were. 2 orphans standing beside our mother's grave, holding onto a grudge that had cost us everything. She left letters, Jake said. I know. I'd been carrying mine in my purse for 3 years. Too angry to open it, too sentimental to throw it away. Maybe we should. He trailed off. Maybe. But we didn't. Not that day. Instead, we walked to our separate cars and drove to our separate lives, carrying our separate grief and our shared stubbornness. The reception at the church was exactly what you'd expect. Casseroles and condolences, stories about Mom's kindness, And everyone carefully not mentioning the elephant in the room, the fact that her children couldn't stand to be in the same space. I lasted an hour before I couldn't take it anymore. The sympathetic looks, the carefully worded questions about how we were holding up, the way conversations stopped when I walked by, it was all too much. I was gathering my things when Jake appeared beside me. "Leaving?" he asked. "Yeah. You?" "Same." We walked toward the door together, not talking, just walking. For a moment, it almost felt normal, like we were kids again, escaping some boring adult function. But then we reached the parking lot, and reality crashed back in. "Sarah," Jake said as I fumbled with my car keys. I turned. "I know we're not. I know things are complicated." "But Mom," he struggled with the words. "She wouldn't want us to keep doing this." "I know. So maybe we could try to figure something out." "Not today, but sometime." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Okay then." "Okay." We drove away in different directions, but for the first time in 3 years, it felt like we might eventually end up in the same place. 3 days later, I was cleaning out Mom's house alone, because Jake and I still couldn't coordinate our schedules without lawyers, when I found it. Mom's jewelry box, the one Dad had given her for their 10th anniversary. I'd been putting off going through her personal things, but the funeral home needed her wedding ring back, and I knew she'd want to be buried with it. The jewelry box played four leaves when you opened it, just like it had when Jake and I were kids. We used to sneak into their bedroom and wind it up, watching the tiny ballerina spin while the melody played. But today, there was something else inside. An envelope addressed to my dear children in Mom's careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "Sarah and Jake," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I pray that you're reading it together. But knowing my stubborn children, you're probably reading it separately, still too proud to be in the same room." Even in death, Mom knew us too well. "There are things you don't know about your father's will. Things I promised him I wouldn't tell you unless you truly needed to hear them. And if you're reading this, then you need to hear them." My heart was pounding. "Your father didn't write that will to punish you or control you. He wrote it because he knew something that you didn't know then, but that I pray you understand now. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice. It's work. It's showing up even when you don't want to. It's forgiving even when you don't think you should." I had to sit down. "The real inheritance isn't the money or the house or the business. It's each other. And if I've failed to help you see that, then I've failed as your mother." Tears were streaming down my face. "There's one more thing. Something your father made me promise to tell you only after I was gone. Check his desk, the bottom drawer, behind the file folders. There's something there that will change everything you think you know about his final wishes." I looked up at Dad's old desk, still sitting in the corner of Mom's bedroom like a shrine. What could possibly be hidden there that would change everything? Some secrets are meant to be kept, others are meant to be discovered at exactly the right moment. What my father hid in his desk drawer wasn't just a secret, it was a revelation that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about our family, our inheritance, and why he'd seemingly designed a will to tear us apart. I stared at Mom's letter for what felt like hours, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of her words. "Something that will change everything you think you know about his final wishes." Dad's desk sat in the corner of Mom's bedroom, like it had for the past 3 years. After he died, Mom couldn't bear to go through his things, so she just moved the entire desk into her room. "So I can still feel like he's close," she'd said. Now, with trembling hands, I approached it like it might explode. The bottom drawer was stuck. It had been for years. Dad used to joke that it was his Fort Knox, where he kept all his important papers safe from burglars and curious children. I'd need tools to get it open. But first, I needed to call Jake. My phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I scrolled to his number. We'd exchanged exactly 12 words since the funeral 3 days ago. Now I was supposed to call him and say what? "Hey, the brother I've been ignoring for 3 years, want to come over and solve a mystery our dead parents left us?" I dialed before I could lose my nerve. "Sarah?" Jake's voice was surprised, cautious. "I found something at Mom's house in Dad's desk. She left a letter saying we need to look at it together." Silence. "Jake, I'm here." Are you sure?" "No, I'm not sure about anything anymore. But Mom seemed to think it was important." Another pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes to prepare for the first real conversation I'd had with my brother in 3 years. 20 minutes to figure out how to act normal around someone who used to be my best friend and had become a stranger. 20 minutes to wonder if whatever Dad had hidden would bring us together or drive us even further apart. Jake arrived exactly 19 minutes later. I know because I was watching the clock, my stomach churning with nerves I hadn't felt since high school. He knocked instead of using the spare key he'd always used growing up. That small gesture somehow hurt more than 3 years of lawyer letters. "Hi," I said, opening the door. "Hi." He looked as uncomfortable as I felt. "So, Mom left a letter?" I handed him the envelope. He read it twice, his expression growing more puzzled with each word. "Behind the file folders in the bottom drawer," he said finally. "Yeah, but it's stuck. Has been for years." We stood there awkwardly for a moment. 3 years of not speaking had apparently erased our ability to function as a team. "I'll get Dad's toolbox," Jake said finally. "It's in the garage." Same spot. While he was gone, I sat on Mom's bed and tried to imagine what we might find. More legal documents? A revised will? Some kind of explanation for why Dad had created such an impossible situation? Jake returned with a crowbar and a screwdriver. "Stand back," he said, kneeling beside the desk. It took about 5 minutes of careful prying before the drawer finally gave way with a loud crack. "Got it," Jake said, pulling the drawer completely out. "There are files in here. But," he reached toward the back of the drawer space, "there's something else." He pulled out a small wooden box I'd never seen before, along with a thick manila envelope. "What's in the envelope?" I asked. Jake opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of photographs, all of them recent within the last 5 years. Photos of Jake at work sites, looking stressed and exhausted. Photos of me at the grocery store, at the library, walking alone through town. Photos of Mom sitting by herself at church, at the doctor's office, at the kitchen table with tears on her face. "He was having us followed," Jake said, his voice hollow. "What? Why?" "Look at this." Jake held up a photo dated just 6 months before Dad died. It showed me sitting on a park bench, staring at my phone. I remembered that day I'd been looking at Jake's business website, wondering how he was doing, too proud to just call. And this one. Another photo, this one of Jake sitting in his truck outside Mom's house. He hadn't gone in, just sat there for what must have been an hour. "He was documenting our misery," I whispered. "No," Jake said, pulling out a letter from the bottom of the envelope. "He was documenting our love." The letter was in Dad's handwriting, addressed to both of us. "My dear Sarah and Jake," Jake read aloud, his voice shaking slightly. "If you're reading this, then Elizabeth has finally shown you where to look, which means she's gone too, and you two are probably sitting in this room together for the first time in far too long." I felt tears starting again. "I know you think I created an impossible situation with my will. I know you've spent these years thinking I was trying to control you from beyond the grave, or punish you for not being the children I wanted, or some other terrible reason that makes sense to your hurt and angry hearts." Jake paused, looking at me. I nodded for him to continue. "But the truth is simpler and more complicated than that. I was dying, and I was scared. Not of death I could handle. I was scared of leaving behind 2 children who had grown so busy with their own lives that they were forgetting what family meant." "That's not true," I protested. "Isn't it?" Jake asked quietly. I thought about it. When was the last time Jake and I had spent time together before Dad got sick? Really spent time together, not just obligatory holiday meals or brief phone calls? "I hired a private investigator," Jake continued reading, "not to spy on you, but to understand you. To see who you'd become when you thought no one was watching." "And do you know what I found?" Jake flipped to the next page. "Sarah, you drive past Jake's worksite every Tuesday on your way to the grocery store, even though there's a shorter route. You slow down, and sometimes you almost stop. You're checking on him, making sure he's okay, even though you haven't spoken in months. Jake, you've driven to Sarah's house 17 times in the past year. You sit in your truck for an average of 43 minutes, and you always leave without knocking. But you check her mailbox, and twice you've left small repairs, fixing her loose porch step, replacing a broken fence board, things she'd never notice but that keep her safe. You both attended every single one of your mother's doctor appointments, sitting in separate areas of the waiting room, pretending not to see each other, but both of you there because you were worried about her. You love each other. You've never stopped loving each other. You've just forgotten how to show it." I was crying openly now. Jake's eyes were suspiciously bright. "The will wasn't designed to punish you," Jake continued. "It was designed to force you to make a choice. You could hire lawyers and fight and stay apart, using your anger as an excuse to avoid the hard work of being family. Or you could choose to come together, to figure it out, to remember that love isn't a feeling, it's a decision you make every single day. I hoped you'd choose each other. I gambled everything on the belief that my children were better than their worst impulses. Jake set the letter down. There's more. He opened the wooden box. Inside was a key and another envelope. The key is to a safety deposit box at First National Bank, Jake read. Box 247. Inside, you'll find the real will, the one I always intended you to have. The complicated will you've been living with for 3 years was, let's call it a test. If you're reading this together, then you've passed. The real will is simple: everything split equally between my 2 children, with the understanding that you'll take care of your mother and each other. No restrictions, no complicated requirements. Just a father's hope that his family will choose love over pride. But if you're reading this separately, if you still can't be in the same room together, then the complicated will stands. Not because I want to punish you, but because a family that can't come together doesn't deserve the easy path. The choice, as always, is yours. Love, Dad. P.S. Sarah, Jake doesn't know about the small repairs he's been making to your house. Jake, Sarah doesn't know that she drives past your work site every week. I hired the investigator because I wanted proof that underneath all the anger and pride, you still cared about each other. I was right. You do. Now do something about it. We sat in complete silence for about 10 minutes. He knew, I said finally. Yeah. All this time, he knew we still. I couldn't finish the sentence. Loved each other. Yeah. Jake picked up one of the photos, the one of me slowing down as I drove past his work site. Every Tuesday? He asked. I nodded, embarrassed. I told myself I was just checking to make sure the business was okay. For Mom's sake. The fence board you replaced, I said. And the porch step. I thought maybe Mom had hired someone. I told myself it was about property values, Jake admitted. We were quiet again. So what now? Jake asked. I looked around Mom's bedroom, at Dad's desk, at the photos scattered between us, at 3 years worth of evidence that we'd been loving each other from a distance this whole time. Now we go to the bank, I said. Together? Together. Jake stood up and extended his hand to help me up. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like the most important handshake of my life. I'm sorry, he said as I took his hand. For all of it. The lawyers, the stubbornness, the wasted time. I'm sorry too. I squeezed his hand. I missed you, Jake. I missed my brother. I missed you too. We gathered up the photos and the letters and the key to the safety deposit box. 3 years of mystery, solved in an afternoon. But as we headed toward the door, I realized that the real mystery had never been about Dad's will or hidden letters or secret investigations. The real mystery was how we let pride convince us that we didn't need each other, when the truth was written in every anxious drive-by, every secret repair, every lonely holiday we'd spent apart. The bank was closing in an hour. We drove separately. Old habits die hard, but we arrived at the same time. The safety deposit box area was quiet, sterile, nothing like the emotional chaos of the past few hours. Box 247, Jake told the bank employee. She led us to a small private room. Take your time, she said, closing the door behind her. The box was smaller than I'd expected. Inside was a single envelope marked the real will and a small velvet bag. Jake opened the envelope while I examined the bag. Inside were Mom and Dad's wedding rings. The ones they'd been buried with were apparently replicas. Sarah, Jake's voice was strange. You need to see this. I looked up from the rings. Jake was staring at the will with an expression I couldn't read. What is it? The inheritance. It's not $2.3 million. My heart sank. Less? More. A lot more. Jake handed me the document. Sarah, Dad sold the original business 5 years ago. Quietly. For $8.7 million. He invested it, and with growth. I stared at the numbers, trying to make sense of them. We're inheriting $12.4 million each. Each? I whispered. Each. Plus the house, which he'd already bought back from the new owners of the company. Plus the company itself, which he'd structured as a management buyback. That would revert to us after his death. I sat down heavily. He made us think we were fighting over scraps, when really, he'd set us up for life. If we could just figure out how to be family again. But there was something else in the box. Another envelope, this one marked open only after reading the real will. Jake and I looked at each other. What do you think? he asked. I was almost afraid to know what other surprises Dad had left us. We've come this far. Jake opened the final envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small brass key. One last thing, Jake read. If you're reading this, then you've found your way back to each other, and you've discovered that the inheritance was never about money. It was about family. But there's one more gift I want to give you. Jake paused, frowning at the paper. What? I asked. The address. Sarah, this is the old Miller farm. The one we used to drive past as kids and dream about buying someday. My breath caught. The Miller farm had been our childhood fantasy, 200 acres of rolling hills and an old farmhouse that we'd always imagined turning into the perfect family compound. Mom and Dad would live in the main house. Jake and I would build our own homes on the property, and our kids would grow up together like we had. He bought it, Jake whispered, reading further. 2 years ago. Had it restored. Sarah, he built our childhood dream. The brass key felt warm in my palm. He knew, I said, tears starting again. Somehow, he knew that if we found our way back to each other, we'd need a place to start over. A place that wasn't haunted by all the years we spent apart. Jake stood up, his face a mixture of wonder and disbelief. Want to go see it? I looked at my brother, really looked at him for the first time in 3 years. The gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, all the proof of the time we'd lost. But also the familiar spark in his eyes that had always meant adventure, possibility, hope. Home is supposed to be a place. 4 walls, a roof, maybe a white picket fence if you're feeling traditional. But as Jake and I drove toward the Miller farm following GPS directions to a property that had existed only in our childhood dreams, I realized that home had never been about the building. It had always been about the people inside it. And for the first time in 3 years, I was going home with my brother. The drive took 23 minutes through countryside that looked exactly like it had when we were kids, racing past in the back of Dad's old pickup truck on Sunday afternoon adventures. Rolling hills, scattered farmhouses, the occasional red barn that looked like it belonged on a Christmas card. We drove in separate cars, but Jake stayed close behind me, and somehow that felt symbolic. We weren't quite ready to share the same space, but we weren't willing to lose each other again either. The Miller farm sat at the end of a gravel road that curved around a small pond. I'd driven past this in trance 1,000 times growing up, always craning my neck to catch a glimpse of the farmhouse that sat on the hill beyond the trees. Now, as I turned onto the property that apparently belonged to us, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely steer. The first thing I noticed was the mailbox. Fresh paint, neat lettering, Chin Family Farm. Jake pulled up beside me and rolled down his window. Did you see the mailbox? Yeah. My voice was barely a whisper. We followed the gravel road up the hill, and when the house came into view, I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears. It was perfect. Not perfect like a magazine photo, but perfect like a dream made real. The old farmhouse had been restored. Beautifully white clapboard siding, green shutters, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs that swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. There were flower boxes under every window, filled with the purple petunias that had been Mom's favorites. But it was the other buildings that made me lose it completely. About 100 yards from the main house, connected by a stone path, was a smaller house that looked like it had been designed just for me. Pale yellow siding, white trim, a little garden plot already prepared and waiting. Beyond that, maybe another 100 yards away, was what was obviously Jake's house, bigger, more rustic, with a workshop attached to the back. 3 houses. 3 separate spaces for the family Dad had always hoped we'd become. Jake appeared at my car window. Sarah? You okay? I couldn't speak. I just shook my head and pointed at the yellow house. He remembered, Jake said softly. You always said you wanted a yellow house with a garden. And you wanted a workshop, I managed to say. For your weekend projects. We stood there in the driveway, staring at the physical manifestation of conversations we'd had 20 years ago, dreams we'd shared as teenagers sitting on Mom and Dad's back porch, planning our future lives. He was listening, Jake said. All those years, he was listening. The brass key opened the front door of the main house. Inside, it was like stepping into a catalog of our childhood memories, but better. The living room had the same layout as our family home, but with better light, more space. The kitchen was enormous, clearly designed for family gatherings and holiday meals, and all the celebrations we'd missed. But it was the mantelpiece that broke us both. Arranged carefully along the wooden shelf were photo frames, dozens of them. But they weren't old family photos. They were empty frames, waiting for new memories. New pictures of holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. A whole life's worth of moments we hadn't had yet. He believed we'd fill them, I said. Jake picked up one of the frames, a double frame meant for wedding photos. He knew we'd both get married someday. Have kids who'd play together in that pond. Have Sunday dinners in this kitchen. We walked through the house slowly, discovering Dad's hopes for us in every room. A study with 2 desks, one for each of us when we needed to work from home. A guest room that was clearly meant to be Mom's, with her favorite blue and white color scheme. Bedrooms upstairs that were obviously intended for grandchildren he'd never met. In the master bedroom, we found one more envelope on the nightstand. "Welcome home," it said in Dad's handwriting. Jake opened it. "If you're reading this, then you've made it home. Not just to this house, but back to each other. That's all I ever really wanted. This farm isn't just your inheritance, it's your invitation. An invitation to build the life we used to dream about. During those Sunday drives. A place where your children can grow up the way you did, surrounded by family, knowing they're loved unconditionally. I bought this place 2 years ago, right after your mother's first heart scare. I knew I wouldn't be around forever, and I was terrified that you'd end up alone in the world, carrying grudges that would rob you of the family you were meant to have. So I took a gamble. I bet everything on the belief that love is stronger than pride, that family bonds are stronger than legal documents, and that my children were smart enough to figure out what really mattered. It looks like I was right. The farm is yours now, both of you, equally. But more than that, the choice is yours. You can sell it, divide the money, and go back to your separate lives. No one would blame you for that. Or you can stay. Build something beautiful here. Fill those picture frames with memories. Give your children the kind of childhood you had, but better. The choice, as always, is yours. But if you choose to stay, there's one more gift waiting for you. Check the barn. All my love, always, Dad. Jake and I looked at each other. The barn? I said. We'd seen it from the house, a big red structure that looked like it had been recently rebuilt. We walked down the hill together, our first real walk as siblings in 3 years, and with every step, it felt more natural, more like coming home. The barn doors were unlocked. Inside, instead of farm equipment, we found Dad's real legacy. It was a workshop, but not just any workshop. This was Jake's dream workspace, professional grade tools, workbenches, everything organized exactly the way he'd always said he wanted it. But in the center of the space was a long wooden table covered with blueprints, plans for expanding the farm, designs for a playground near the pond, architectural drawings for a small chapel where family weddings could be held, sketches for a vegetable garden big enough to feed a dozen people. And at the center of the table, weighted down with a smooth stone that looked like it had come from the pond, was a final note. The farm isn't finished. It's just the beginning. The rest is up to you. Jake ran his hands over the workbench, testing the tools Dad had selected for him. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I know this is a lot to process. And I know we have a lot to figure out. But, what if we tried? What if we actually did this?" I looked around the barn, imagining it full of the sounds of family, kids laughing, adults talking, the comfortable chaos of people who belong together. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." "Sarah, we've wasted 3 years being stubborn. What if we spent the next 30 years being family instead?" I thought about my life back in town, my empty house, my quiet evenings, my carefully controlled existence that never surprised me because it never included anyone else. Then I thought about Sunday dinners in that big kitchen, kids running between the 3 houses, calling both Jake and me aunt and uncle. Holidays that actually felt like celebrations instead of obligations. What about our jobs? Our lives? What lives? Jake asked. "Sarah, we've been existing, not living." "When's the last time you were truly happy?" I couldn't remember. "The business is failing anyway," Jake continued. "I could rebuild it here. Do custom work, specialty projects. You could freelance, right from home. Or we could start something completely new together. Together? Partners. Like we always talked about when we were kids. Remember? You were going to handle the business side. I was going to handle the building. We were going to change the world." I did remember. I remembered a lot of things standing in that barn, surrounded by Dad's hopes for our future. "The yellow house," I said. "Yeah, it really is perfect." Jake grinned, the first real smile I'd seen from him in 3 years. "Want to go look at it?" "Yeah, I do." We spent the rest of the afternoon exploring our new home because that's what it was, I realized. Not just a property we'd inherited, but the home we'd never known we'd been missing. The yellow house was everything I'd ever dreamed of. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, hardwood floors throughout. The kitchen was small but efficient, with a window over the sink that looked out over the garden plot. The living room had built-in bookshelves and a fireplace that looked like it actually worked. But it was the back porch that sold me completely. It faced west, toward the sunset, with a view of both Jake's house and the main farmhouse. I could sit here in the evenings and see the lights in my family's windows, know that I wasn't alone anymore. Jake's house was perfect for him. 2 bigger, with an open floor plan and high ceilings. The workshop attached to the back was smaller than the one in the barn, but perfect for smaller projects. There was even a guest room where his future wife and kids could stay when they visited. We were walking back to the main house as the sun started to set when Jake stopped suddenly. "Sarah, are you really considering this, or are we just caught up in the moment?" I thought about it honestly. Was I ready to uproot my entire life? Leave the town where I'd lived for 35 years. Take a chance on rebuilding a relationship with a brother I'd barely spoken to in years? "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too." "What if we fight again? What if we can't make this work?" "Then we'll figure it out," Jake said. "Together. Like families are supposed to do." I looked at the 3 houses, imagining them full of light and laughter and all the family dinners we'd missed. I thought about Dad, working in secret to build us this second chance. I thought about Mom, hoping until the very end that we'd find our way back to each other. "Okay," I said. Okay, let's do this. Let's be a family again." Jake hugged me then, the first hug we'd shared since Dad's funeral 3 years earlier. It felt like coming home. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my yellow kitchen, looking out at the garden where I'm growing Mom's purple petunias. Jake's workshop lights are on. He's been working late on a custom cabinet order that came in last week. His business is thriving here, word of mouth travels fast in farm country, and people appreciate quality craftsmanship. I've been freelancing successfully, handling marketing and communications for small businesses throughout the county. It turns out there was a real need for those services here, and I love the work in a way I never loved my corporate job. We have Sunday dinners in the main house every week, just the 2 of us for now, but we've left the dining room table set for 8, optimistically. Jake's been dating Sarah from Mom's old book club. Yes, the other Sarah, which is going to be confusing if they get married, but we'll figure it out. I've been seeing David, who owns the hardware store in town. Nothing serious yet, but he makes me laugh. And he's already talking about helping with the spring planting. The picture frames on the mantelpiece are starting to fill up. Photos from our first Thanksgiving at the farm. Pictures of Jake teaching me how to use power tools in his workshop. Snapshots of ordinary moments that feel extraordinary because we're experiencing them together. But the best part isn't the house or the farm, or even the money that's made all of this possible. The best part is that we're writing a new story now. Not the story of 2 siblings who let pride tear them apart, but the story of a family that found its way home. Dad was right about inheritance. The real one isn't money or property, or even perfect farmhouses with yellow siding and purple petunias. The real inheritance is the choice to love each other, even when it's hard, even when you're angry, even when you've forgotten how to be family. It's the decision to keep showing up, to keep trying, to keep believing that some things are worth fighting for. And family, messy, complicated, beautiful family, is always worth fighting for. "Welcome home," Dad would say if he were here. We're finally home.